Hi there, welcome to CarlaVoyance, where I discuss all things intuitive, Akashic records, and counselling. I'm the owner of Carla's Realignments and the author of various personal development books. I'm your host, Carla Savannah. Thank you for joining me. Welcome, Patreon family. I'm delighted to bring you this week's theme, which is After the Awakening. Let's have a look at what the awakening actually is. An awakening is when you go through a period of transformation, like when the caterpillar turns into a butterfly, otherwise known as a trigger for the dark night of the soul. There are so many life events that can trigger an awakening or the dark night. Most often, they are very, very big challenges that make you question every belief you've ever lived by. You see, we grow up being part of a pattern system. Our 4D, or the matrix, keeps us dumbed down so we don't ask too many questions of the structures and the rules that we live by. We are mostly in somewhat of a hypnagogic state. Just like children, we are sponges robotically doing our daily lives. Suddenly, if something happens, like a health issue, or we experience a trauma or a loss, or anything that creates a break in one of those patterns, it wakes us up from that spongy, robotic, hypnagogic sort of state. So for me, it was the loss of my father. I remember my father being in a coma for weeks, and I was a single mum at this stage in a strange city because my father had to be transferred from the city that he was in to another city in order to have the brain surgery. And I remember being in ICU with my dad. And up to this point, I think I was very spoilt or very protected by my dad. So when my dad became sick, it was very, very challenging. And one day I was there with my dad and I had my 2-year-old with me as well on my lap. And as we were waiting for my dad to come out of the coma, I remember holding his hand, and my daughter was becoming very, very restless because she was hungry. So I knew I had to feed her and I knew I had to tend to her, but I still needed to be there for my dad as well. At one point, she was pulling on me so much by the hand, trying to get me to leave, and I just didn't want to let go of my dad's hand. There was a critical moment there for me where I had to make that decision. Do I choose my dad and stay, or do I choose to let go and move forward with my responsibilities as a mother? So at that one critical sort of moment in time, I chose my daughter and I left and I let go of my dad's hand. This was actually symbolic for me because there was a part of me that at that moment had to let go of being the daughter and being the one that was protected all the time, and then step into the mature adult part of me, which had to be the mother and the protector of another human being. So these events, it's like they're an abrupt shock to the system, and everything that we ever knew to be real, or everything that made us feel safe or secure and supported, is under threat. Sometimes we desperately try to get things back to the way they were. If we can't do that and we realize that nothing will ever go back to the same as it was again, that's when we become scared of all the changes that are taking place. And that's when we wake up. It's like such a shock to the system, and we wake up out of the matrix and we start to become a different type of maturity and different type of presence. So the awakening provides a very critical shift in thinking. We are shifting from that robotic 4th dimensional way of doing things into a 5th dimensional thinking mind where we actually have the opportunity to make a choice, which is what happened to me in regards to, going from child to adult, from daughter to mother. I had to make that very critical choice at that moment in time. And to be able to shift properly into a 5th dimensional way of thinking, we need to become accountable and responsible for all those choices. So the time of being children and allowing our parents and society to make decisions for us is technically gone when this happens. And we become acutely aware that it's all up to us to make ourselves happy and make the decision that will lead us towards our own happiness. And how terrifying to think that now, we can't put the responsibility on everyone else or blame everyone else for the things that are happening to us. And that's an awakening. So at first we're in denial. Then we start to try and negotiate it in our head, how can we get things back to the way they were? And when that doesn't work, we want to just fight and become angry at everything and everyone. There's somewhat of a purging that actually happens here. Some people even actually become physically ill or physically sick to the stomach. At some point, that anger and that stress becomes so exhausting, and then comes this strong, extreme period of sadness. And within this sadness, this is where people can feel like they go into a very serious, deep sort of depression. They disconnect from the world. All they want to do is to go inward, maybe sleeping a lot. There's an extreme sense of tiredness and exhaustion. And all they need is to just find ways to cope and feel safe, secure, and supported within themselves, for themselves. So here a person is handed the opportunity to devise some tools for supporting themselves mentally, physically, and emotionally. This is an absolutely critical moment in the lives of someone who's in that process of awakening, where they either accept responsibility for themselves moving forward and really seek out the tools to support them and help themselves, or they stay in their sense of lack and personal lack of resources and that disempowered state, waiting for someone, which in the past has been a parent-like figure, to come and rescue them so that they don't have to do it alone or do it by themselves or do it for themselves. The critical shift that happens within the awakening is that shift from fourth dimensional reliance on the feeding of the energy of people around us to the fifth dimensional energy of taking full responsibility for oneself and their choices and moving forward. When a person decides to then take full responsibility for themselves, they start to look over their lives and analyze where they could have done things differently. So responsibility does not mean that you blame yourself for everything that happened to you, okay? There's a very big difference here. Taking responsibility means that you now have the power back in your hands. Taking responsibility means that you own what you could have changed. Taking responsibility gives you the power of having the choice of making yourself happy and not putting that responsibility on other people to make you happy, because your happiness is your responsibility. So here is where acceptance slowly starts to creep in, okay? It's after that period of sadness and depression. By accepting the changes and your current circumstances and the fact that now it's all up to you to really make yourself happy, now you're actually saying, okay, it is what it is. And now what can I do for myself to move forward? From a place of acceptance, in acceptance, that part of you will begin to notice many changes take place. You allow yourself to rest when you need to. Your diet might change. You might no longer want to see or be around certain people. You may not want to do things you used to like doing. And guess what? You finally actually start to focus on you and the choices that you make. You don't focus on seeking significance through helping others or making other people happy or worrying about other people's judgment. You start to understand that unless you help yourself first, you can't actually help others or make other people happy. Next week, I'm going to delve a little bit more into some tools and coping strategies for getting through the dark night of the soul or getting through an awakening. So make sure you tune in then. I hope you have an amazing day. I'm Carla Savannah, and I look forward to chatting with you soon. Mwah.